So let's get started.
Okay.
All right, man. So, do you prefer that we go by Ward Wallace or Colin Ward? How do you want to...
Since this is an acting forum, we'll go by Colin. But I am Ward Wallace, and my Screen Actors Guild name is Colin Ward because when I was Taft-Hartley on my very first speaking role back in '88, there were no extras. It was just the stars, which was Stephen Lang, Tony Dennison, Dennis Farina.
Yeah.
And it was great. I made a lot of money, and I said, and Tony Dennison, who is now on Major Crimes, or I think that's what it's called, he was wonderful.
Yeah.
He was wonderful. He threw me lines. He knew I'd never had a speaking role. He threw me lines. He had that much power on Crime Story. It was the old Crime Story.
Yeah.
He threw me lines that weren't in the script. I was so impressed. I said, man. And I worked with him one other time after that, and he remembered me, and he was absolutely great. He treated me like an equal, even though I obviously wasn't. But we went into what they call golden time.
Yeah.
As you well know what that is. And I made more in the last 2 hours than I did the rest of the day, and sitting in the trailer. And, we're ready for you, Mr. Ward. I was Mr. Wallace then because I got Taft-Hartley on that job. And I decided to go ahead and do it, not knowing any, how much SAG work there was or whatever. But and I, from day one, I always was compensated for working.
Right.
There was no working for free, but there wasn't there wasn't nearly as much, if any at all, independent work in those days in Vegas.
Yeah.
Which is a good segue, but anyway, I was Taft-Hartley, and they already had a Ward Wallace. And not having any advice or knowing, I could have just added my middle initial. Like when you see Michael J. Fox, that's because there was a Michael Fox already. I didn't know that, but I wanted to get out from under the name Ward Wallace. It just didn't.
Yeah.
Colin Ward is a little stronger, shorter, so that's where Colin Ward came from, and it's all the actors know me as Colin, and all the musicians know me as Ward. Mm-hmm. It's still in my name either way.
Right. So how did you fall into acting? I mean, I know you've been doing music.
I semi-retired full-time music in '87.
Yeah,
needed a break. So a friend of mine, Mark Barrett, who was a great drummer, plays with Lon Bronson, and also an agent. He was just starting as an agent in those days.
Okay.
And he called me and said, "You want to be on a TV show?" It was as an extra, and I played upright bass, and I said, "Sure," because I needed money. And then one thing led to another. I didn't do a lot of extra work, but in the beginning I did 3 or 4 gigs as an extra. And I was totally always been fascinated with movies and behind the scenes things and makeup, and always was an actor, not knowing I was from the time I was small, because I was so painfully shy, and I still am, but I'm an old man now, so I've learned how to deal with it through music. Gave me a reason to be on stage. I'm in the band.
Yeah.
So, and but as a child, I grew up in the country. Spent my childhood in the country, and had, I had my brothers to play with, but they were all younger. And every night when I'd come home from school, I was a different person. I was Tarzan, I was Zorro, or I'd go play war, and we had a woods.
Right.
I mean, and it was glorious. You could do anything in there. I had tree houses with ropes and stuff. I was always someone else and in front of the family. But to have pictures of me and my brother dressed full-fledged cowboys, with the guns, and we're like, I'm 2 years older than he is, and we got their gun. I was about 5, and he was. But that's where my love of acting started, and I'm not knowing. But then I was always into the movies.
Yeah. So when do you feel the transition to becoming a serious actor or doing professional work as an actor happen for you, aside from doing the initial extra work? Like, when did that happen for you?
Well, I got booked as an extra as a bodyguard initially. There were 4 of us. And it was for Crime Story, and I showed up, and they had 4 other guys. The next day, I had a speaking role as one of 2 bodyguards. Don't ask me how it happened, but she must have known someone. I didn't even have to audition for it.
That's definitely very unusual. I mean,
Totally.
Considering how things go today.
And I got to work with Stephen Lang, who is in everything now.
Yeah.
Avatar, and he threw me across the room in the scene.
And what production was that?
That was Crime Story. It was called Atomic Fallout, I think it was called. That's that particular episode. I've taken so many classes that I can't even put them all on my resume. It was like four names deep for 4 columns.
Yeah.
Everybody, every casting director, and I worked with the then theater arts director at UNLV and a few plays, and so when I went from film study and scene study and all that, and monologues and all that stuff, and where they would video you so that you could see your work with an objective criticism. No one else could offer any, not even the instructor wouldn't tell you anything. It would offer constructive criticism. Michael, when I went to stage, I felt as if I was overacting. Because you have to be bigger and your voice has to project.
Right.
And your movements, you can't just use an eyebrow or a tilt of the head.
Yeah, it's not like film where everything's just a microcosm. Everything
especially
is so,
in close-ups.
Yeah. Like there's micro movements that are so large on the screen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to know when you're doing the master, when you're doing a 2-shot or a 3-shot, and ask what your frame is.
Right.
Especially if you're in a 2-shot, or if you're in just you need to know if they're doing close-up or if they're doing waist or whatever, so that you can know how much movement.
Right.
Because if you're thinking, they're going to do a close-up.
Right.
So if you're doing a whole lot of stuff,
it's just too much. It's just way over the top.
The editing is going to be insane.
Right.
So as long as there's going to be a close-up, you have to limit your movement so that it'll match. The camera picks up every nuance, especially in a close-up or 2-shot. And there have been actors, and I can't remember their names, big actors like McQueen and Brando. They would throw away pages of script because, as John Ford said, this is a visual medium.
Right.
And if it can't be shown in the face, no words are going to. And I get a lot of either ranchers or cops, detectives, or mob type guys, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that at all. Work is work. I love this craft, and all I want to do is work. But I'm conscious of that, and I try to, maybe like in Territory 8, I try to be the patriarchal, no-nonsense, only one who was still sane, basically, with the group I was associated with in the movie. I don't think I portrayed an innocent quality, but I tried to portray a strong,
sort of a grounded,
reliable. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that definitely came across because when I watched it, I did notice that the character that he portrayed in that film was definitely very. There was something very grounding about that character every time he came on the screen.
Yes, that's what he was supposed to be, and less is more. I tried to do as little as possible. I probably could have done even less. Less is more is one of the things the actors, all the great actors on Actors Studio, they always say that.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that they all say somewhere in the interview is the most important thing is listening in a scene.
Yeah, it's so
but
true.
not acting like you're listening,
Right.
but actually listening. You have to know your lines frontwards and backwards.
Right. You have to be off book. I mean, even when you go to an audition, you know, you should be off book by that point, because otherwise, you know, again, like you said, if you're not listening, then you're not really participating in this scene.
There's two kinds of actors. There's a verbal and a nonverbal. A verbal actor is a lot of the old-time theater stuff where people memorize by rote. So what they're thinking about in a scene isn't in the moment. They're thinking about their line.
Right.
So how can you act when you think about your line? If you know your lines well enough and you're in the moment and you're in that scene so deep that you're actually listening to someone, and if you go off book, you'll be able to improvise.
Right. Because you know, you understand the subtext and the context
Absolutely.
of the scene, right?
But a nonverbal actor is an actor who's in the moment, not thinking about their lines. They know their lines so backwards and forwards. And then one of the things I love about acting is I want to elicit or inform or educate the audience. I want to elicit a reaction where they've either just enjoyed it for the entertainment value, or they've learned something either about themselves or about life or about people or whatever. That's what it's about.
So tell us about some things that you're working on now, or that, you know, developing. Or...
I have a note. I just finished the first episode of a TV series called The D Coffee Shop. Closes at 9. I'm a recurring character, a supporting role every week of General Grant.
Oh, okay.
Who is like it's a Twilight Zone sci-fi lesson in how to let go of things that are negative in your life. And we, as the characters on there, sort of guide people. We find candidates and guide people through to either make the choice of, here's what you need to do to get the monkey off your back. So you have the choice of continuing the way you are, or you have the choice of seeing what we're trying to show you. And it's called D Coffee Shop, closes at 9. It's I'm told it's going to be on February 13th.
Oh, okay. Where will that be?
It'll be on Las Vegas My TV, or my Vegas TV, which is channel 12 or 36.
All right.
Depending on whether you have cable or what. And it's directed by Adrian Zamed. And every week there's a co-star who's the focal point.
Yeah.
The person we bring in this episode, it was a really good actor. Talk about less is more, and what some people think is underplaying, but it doesn't come across like that. When you see it in the video, you see things. Right. His name is Russ Russo from LA. He's a really good actor. I had played there's a character called Priest Crow in this, who is they're like not fallen angels, but angels of a sort, who have each one. Adrian plays the doctor, and then there's a fortune teller, and they all have certain powers. And Priest Crow has immense powers to help you, or okay, so you choose to keep your life the way it is. There you go. And what my character did in this first episode was basically to introduce to the audience through his dialogue who Priest Crow is. He has the amazing power to save lives. And in my research for the role of Grant, I found out that some amazing things about General Grant, and that's the way I played him. He was General Grant drank a fifth of whiskey a day. Most people know he was a drinker. They say there were additives in that whiskey, and he smoked 20 cigars a day.
Wow.
And he absolutely abhorred war. One of the greatest tacticians, at least in his time, and probably of all time, hated war and the death, and he was guilt-ridden over.
That's probably why he drank so much. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because of they had no ambulatory service during the Civil War. Bodies were just laying around. No one to bury them. The families didn't know. They had no way of telling. Most of the time, they had no way of telling the families whether someone was dead or even marking the graves. And this was in the thousands.
It's horrific. So that basically informed the psychology of the character, how you portrayed him.
Absolutely. Plus the fact that he was drinking and all the effects.
Was that portrayed in a nonverbal way, as you say, or?
Yeah, because when we were talking about Michael Caine, and I had questions about how do I get the audience to cry. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. He wasn't. He was an alcoholic, but he wasn't a drunk.
Right.
And the way you get the audience to cry and not you, or the way you play someone who's drunk, is to do everything you can to not act drunk.
Exactly.
And to do everything you can to not cry.
Mm-hmm. What is your feeling about working with directors and producers and filmmakers of different varieties in the Las Vegas area? Like, what are some of the good things and maybe not so good things that you've experienced, and what can we sort of glean from that from you?
Well, 28 years in the acting business, and starting the way I did, where I had the opportunities, which there aren't there in those days. And still, to a point, there aren't that many opportunities in the Vegas artistic community, but there are a lot more now than because of the advent of the indie films. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal. It's great. Where everyone gets a chance to ply their craft and learn from it. And a lot of kids have a lot more opportunities to learn the craft and fulfill their dreams if they have that dream, and to learn whether or not this is for them and what it really takes, and what I remember back then them talking about having a major Los Angeles studio coming to town, and we're still waiting for that big studio, although supposedly with the incentives now more, I think there's going to be 35 out-of-town productions coming to town to film major.
Yeah, there's quite a bit this coming year.
And hopefully some of the local actors will have a chance to audition for something in those films. Mm-hmm. Most of the time they're already cast. And younger actors have to understand that not only do you need to study your craft, however you're going to study it. I study every day. I can't watch anything I'm not trying to figure out, how did he do that? Or, that was nice. I never would have thought of that. Mm-hmm. And that's why, and I appreciate and realize that's why they're where they are. Mm-hmm. Even if they're playing someone that's not like them, or they're playing some goofy guy, most of those people are extremely intelligent and gifted. That's why they're there. Right. So they didn't get there like that. They learned it all, and hopefully there will be chances for people to get. Usually it's minor roles, but it's still a role. Because younger people have to understand all the variables that go into casting process, especially on a major motion picture where you have phenomenal budgets, and lots of times the creative control of the actor or the director. I mean, big-time actors have lots of control as to who's in their movie. Mm-hmm. especially if they have a vested interest, and many of them do have their own production companies now.
Right.
You have to understand that.
It's fairly common now, yeah.
Understand the rejection of being an actor, and everyone goes through it, but you have to understand that it's not personal. And if you go in there, it's Bryan Cranston. I just saw a thing that he did, and I saved it. It was brilliant. Nobody hardly knew of Bryan Cranston before
Breaking Bad, yeah.
Breaking Bad.
But he was around for a long, long time before that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, I finally figured out, and he started getting more auditions when he did this. Because I finally figured out what the audition process is for me. Not only for my preparedness, but it's a performance. You go in, there are certain do's and don'ts that you don't do. You be professional. You don't start conversations with anyone that they don't start first, and you answer their questions. Other than that, you don't, you have to be positive and confident. Confidence is what they're looking for, and they want you to show them that what they didn't think they knew, which is you're the person for that role.
Right.
And it's a performance. You go in, you do it, you perform what you're doing, and then you forget about it. You leave, you forget about it. Hopefully, with the indie scene, which it's blossoming quite rapidly in this town, there will be more. Actors will be compensated better. And I know that some people say, well, I'll do anything. I don't care if I get paid. I just want to get the experience. So that's fine. But to ask actors who have paid their dues and have been around a while and actually know what they're doing to work for nothing is, I do not support that. And
there's other options. I mean, if you don't have a budget or your budget is small, there's ways to approach that are appropriate.
And it doesn't mean you don't do it.
Right.
You could be helping a friend who needs it and is worth helping.
Right.
But every person with a camera isn't a director.
You got any other projects coming up?
Hopefully, the next episode of The Coffee Shop. Other than music, I'm just like everyone else, waiting for that next audition. This is a slow time of year too. But it'll pick up again.
So people need to get busy then and start writing some good scripts.
And
get
I'm
some more work
available.
going out there.
I can dye my hair and look a lot younger.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming and doing this
Toby,
interview with us.
man. I think what you're doing is really good, and I can't wait to see everyone else that you've got.
Oh, there's many more coming. Yeah, there's many more coming.
Except for Michael O'Neill. You'll watch him. Watch that Mike O'Neill guy.
I'll be sure to tell him that. All right. Thanks, Colin.
Okay.